What happens when a Hollywood legend sits down for what should be a simple morning chat and finds himself facing one of the most disrespectful interviews of his career? In just 44 seconds, Lorraine Kelly went from cheerful host to the most talked about villain on British television. Michael Caine walked onto the set that morning expecting the usual pleasantries, the kind of warm, light conversation that morning television is known for. He'd done hundreds of these interviews over his decades-long career. He knew the routine. Smile, wave to the audience, talk about the new film, share a funny story or two, and be on his way. Simple, easy, comfortable. But the moment he sat down across from Lorraine Kelly and her panel, something felt different. There was an edge in the air, a tension that didn't belong in a morning chat show. Lorraine had that look in her eye, the one that says she's got something planned, something she thinks will make great television. Sitting alongside Lorraine were two of her regular panelists. James, an entertainment correspondent who usually kept things light and breezy, and Sarah, a lifestyle columnist known for her sharp tongue and even sharper opinions. Both of them seemed unusually quiet as Michael settled into his seat, almost like they knew what was coming. Lorraine started off normally enough. "Michael, wonderful to have you here. You look fantastic." Her smile was broad, but there was something artificial about it, something performative. Michael, ever the gentleman, smiled back. "Thank you, Lorraine. Always a pleasure to be here. Now, you've got a new film out," Lorraine continued, glancing down at her notes. "But I have to say, Michael, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but don't you think you're getting a bit old for action roles?" The studio went quiet. Even the audience seemed to sense the boundary that had just been crossed. Michael's smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. "Well, I'm 76 and still working, so I suppose the answer is no. I don't think I'm too old." Lorraine laughed, that dismissive kind of laugh that tells you she doesn't really care about your answer. "Yes, but surely there comes a time when you should step aside and let the younger generation have their moment. I mean, how many films do you really need to make?" Sarah, the lifestyle columnist, jumped in with a smirk. "I think what Lorraine is trying to say is that maybe it's time to enjoy retirement. You've had a wonderful career. Why not end on a high note before, things start to decline?" Michael's jaw tightened. You could see him processing what he'd just heard. This wasn't friendly banter. This was an ambush. "I make films because I love making films," he said carefully. "I don't see why age should stop me from doing what I'm passionate about." "But Michael," Lorraine pressed on, leaning forward like she was about to make some profound point, "don't you think it's a bit selfish? Taking roles that could go to younger actors who are trying to build their careers? You've already had your time in the spotlight." The audience gasped. Actually gasped. James, the entertainment correspondent, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but said nothing. He just sat there, complicit in his silence. Michael's face changed. The warmth that he'd brought onto the set was gone. In its place was something cold, something disappointed. "Selfish," he repeated. "You think it's selfish for me to work?" "Well, yes," Lorraine said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You've made your money. You've won your awards. Why not give someone else a chance? It feels a bit greedy, doesn't it?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. There are so many talented young actors out there struggling to get their break, and here you are, taking up space. Taking up space." Those three words hung in the air like a grenade. Michael Caine, one of the most respected actors in the world, was being told he was taking up space. "I see," Michael said quietly. Too quietly. "So in your view, Lorraine, once someone reaches a certain age, they should just disappear? Just stop doing what they love because younger people exist?" Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Michael. I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, you should think about stepping back. You've had an incredible run. Why not end it before people start to think you're desperate? Desperate. There it was. The final insult. Michael's eyes narrowed. Desperate, he repeated. You think I'm desperate? Well, I mean, doing film after film at your age, Lorraine shrugged. It does make one wonder if you need the money or the attention. The audience was dead silent now. This had gone so far beyond normal interview territory that nobody knew how to react. James finally found his voice. Perhaps we should talk about the actual film, he suggested weakly. But Lorraine wasn't done. She never knew when to stop. Before we do that, I just have to ask Michael, and please don't take this the wrong way, but do you ever look in the mirror and think, maybe I should have stopped 5 years ago? 10 years ago? Do you ever worry that you're damaging your legacy by continuing? Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. That's a fair question, Lorraine. I mean, we've all seen actors who stayed too long, who went from respected to, well, a bit sad. Michael sat perfectly still. His hands were folded in his lap. His face was a mask of composure, but anyone who knew anything about human emotion could see the fury building behind his eyes. A bit sad, he said. That's what you think of actors who continue to work into their later years. Not all of them, Lorraine backtracked, and sensing perhaps that she'd pushed too far. Just, some. The ones who can't seem to let go. Like me, Michael said. It wasn't a question. I didn't say that, Lorraine protested, though her smile said otherwise. You didn't have to, Michael replied. He uncrossed his legs and placed his hands on the armrests of his chair, the body language of someone preparing to leave. You've made your opinion quite clear. Lorraine's smile became more forced. Oh, come on, Michael. Don't be sensitive. We're just having a conversation. A conversation, Michael repeated. Is that what this is? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels more like a prosecution. Sarah jumped back in, clearly enjoying the drama. I think you're being a bit unfair, Michael. Lorraine is just asking questions that a lot of people are thinking. Is she? Michael's voice was sharp now, all pretense of politeness gone. And what people are those, exactly? People like you two who think that anyone over 70 should just crawl away and die quietly? Now that's not fair, Lorraine said, her tone hardening. We never said anything like that. You didn't have to, Michael shot back. You called me selfish. You called me greedy. You suggested I'm desperate and damaging my own legacy. You said I'm taking up space. What exactly did I misunderstand? James tried again to intervene. Maybe we're all getting a bit heated here. Let's take a breath and... No, Michael cut him off. I don't think we need to take a breath. I think we need to be honest about what's happening here. You invited me on your show, Lorraine, not to talk about my work, not to have a genuine conversation, but to humiliate me, to make yourself look clever at my expense. Lorraine's face flushed. That is absolutely not true. I'm a professional. I've been doing this for years. Then act like it, Michael said coldly. Because right now, you're acting like a bully. The word bully hit like a slap. Lorraine's mouth opened and closed. For once, she seemed at a loss for words, but only for a moment. How dare you, she finally managed. I have never bullied anyone in my life. I ask tough questions. That's my job. Tough questions? Michael's voice rose slightly. Tough questions are about my work, my process, my experiences. What you're doing is attacking me personally because of my age. That's not journalism, Lorraine. That's ageism, plain and simple. Sarah scoffed. Oh, please. You can't just throw around words like that because someone asks you something you don't like. Michael turned to her, his gaze piercing. And you, sitting there, agreeing with everything she says, piling on. Do you feel good about yourself? Does it make you feel important to tear down someone who's achieved more in their career than you could ever dream of? Sarah's face went bright red. Excuse me? You heard me, Michael said. You sit here on this panel every day, offering opinions on people's lives, people's careers, without ever having done anything significant yourself. You're a commentator, a critic, someone who lives vicariously through other people's achievements. And you have the audacity to tell me that I'm taking up space. Michael, Lorraine's voice was sharp now, angry. You need to calm down. I need to calm down. Michael stood up. The movement was so sudden that it made Lorraine and her panelists flinch. I've sat here for the past several minutes while you've insulted me, dismissed my career, questioned my motives, and suggested that I should retire because I'm inconveniencing younger actors. And you think I need to calm down? James was pale now. Perhaps we should go to a commercial break. Excellent idea, Michael said. Because I won't be here when you come back. He reached for the microphone clipped to his collar and began to remove it. The action was deliberate, final. Lorraine seemed to realize, finally, that this was actually happening. That Michael Caine was walking out of her show, on live television. Michael, wait, she said, and for the first time, there was a note of panic in her voice. You're overreacting. We were just having a discussion. Michael paused, the microphone in his hand. A discussion requires mutual respect, Lorraine, something you've shown absolutely none of. He placed the microphone on the arm of the chair. I've been in this industry for over 50 years. I've worked with the best directors, the best actors, the best crews in the world. I've won Oscars. I've been knighted. I've earned the right to continue working for as long as I choose, and I don't need permission from you or anyone else. Sarah, unwilling to let it go, added one more jab. Well, this is all very dramatic. Michael turned to her one last time. You want dramatic? How about this? In 20 years, when you're sitting where I am now, I hope someone treats you with more dignity than you've shown me today. I genuinely hope that. Because this, he gestured around the set, this is beneath all of you. Lorraine stood up too, trying to regain control. If you walk out of here, Michael, you're proving that you can't handle honest criticism. Honest criticism, Michael smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Is that what you call it? Here's some honest criticism for you, Lorraine. You're a host who's forgotten that your job is to celebrate your guests, not belittle them. You've become so obsessed with creating viral moments that you've lost sight of basic human decency. And that's why shows like this are dying. Because people are tired of watching others be torn down for entertainment. He started walking toward the edge of the set. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was frozen. Nobody knew what to do. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how morning television was supposed to go. Lorraine called after him, her composure cracking. You're being incredibly unprofessional. Michael stopped at the edge of the set and turned back one last time. Unprofessional? I showed up on time. I was prepared to promote my film and have a pleasant conversation. You're the one who turned this into an attack. You're the one who made it personal. So if anyone's being unprofessional here, Lorraine, it's you. Sarah muttered something under her breath. Michael caught it. What was that? He asked. Sarah looked up, defiant. I said, good riddance. The audience gasped again. James put his head in his hands. Lorraine looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. And Michael Caine just smiled. A real smile this time. Because he'd won. Not by shouting louder or being crueler, but by maintaining his dignity in the face of their pettiness. Good riddance, he repeated. Well, at least you're honest about your character. I appreciate that. He looked at the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you had to witness this. You came here expecting entertainment, and instead you got, well, whatever this was. I hope the rest of your day is better than mine has been. And then he walked off. Just like that. Left Lorraine Kelly and her panelists sitting there in stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling because nobody had told them to stop, or the audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. The whole studio was in chaos. Lorraine tried to recover. "Well," she said, her voice shaky, "that was unexpected." James finally found his voice. "Perhaps we should have approached that differently." "Oh, shut up, James," Sarah snapped. "He's an old man who can't take criticism. That's not our fault." But even as she said it, you could see the doubt in her eyes. Because deep down, she knew. They all knew. They'd crossed a line. They'd invited a legend onto their show and treated him like garbage. And he'd called them out on it. In front of everyone. Lorraine shuffled her papers, trying desperately to move on. "Right. Well, when we come back, we'll be talking about, She looked down at her notes, but seemed unable to focus. "We'll be talking about summer fashion trends." The show cut to commercial, but the damage was done. In those few minutes, Lorraine Kelly had shown the world exactly who she was, and Michael Caine had shown exactly who he was. One of them came out looking petty, entitled, and mean-spirited. The other came out looking dignified, principled, and strong. Backstage, as Michael Caine gathered his things, a production assistant approached him nervously. "Mr. Caine, I'm so sorry about what happened out there." Michael looked at the young woman, and his expression softened. "Not your fault, love. You didn't do anything wrong." "Still," she said, "that was really unfair, what they said to you." "It was," Michael agreed. "But you know what? I've been in this business long enough to know that some people will try to tear you down to make themselves feel bigger. The trick is not to let them, not to sink to their level." He smiled. "Besides, I've got a film to promote. I'll find other shows. Better shows. Shows that actually want to have a conversation rather than a confrontation." The production assistant smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you handled that brilliantly." "Thank you," Michael said. "That means more than you know." He left the building with his head held high. Behind him, on that set, Lorraine Kelly and her panel were dealing with the fallout of their own making. The audience was talking among themselves. The crew was whispering. Everyone knew they'd just witnessed something significant. A moment where a beloved star had been disrespected and had refused to stand for it. In the control room, the producers were in panic mode. They knew this was going to be everywhere. Every news site, every social media platform, every entertainment show. And they knew how it was going to look. Because there was no ambiguity here. No gray area. Lorraine and her panelists had been cruel, and Michael had been justified in his response. Back on set, as they returned from commercial, Lorraine tried to act like nothing had happened, but her hands were shaking slightly as she held her notes. Sarah was quieter than usual. Even James, who had barely participated in the attack, looked uncomfortable. "So, summer fashion," Lorraine said with forced brightness. "Sarah, what trends are you seeing?" But nobody was listening. The audience was still processing what they'd seen. The crew was still in shock. And somewhere, Michael Caine was already in a car, heading to his next appointment, completely unbothered by the chaos he'd left behind. Because that's the thing about dignity. You can't take it from someone who knows their worth. Lorraine had tried. She'd thrown everything she had at him. Insults, dismissiveness, condescension. And none of it had stuck. Because Michael Caine knew who he was. He knew what he'd accomplished. He didn't need validation from a morning talk show host or her panel of enablers. What Lorraine didn't understand, what people like her never understand, is that age doesn't diminish talent. It doesn't erase achievement. It doesn't make someone less worthy of respect. If anything, it should command more. Someone who's been at the top of their profession for over 50 years deserves celebration, not criticism. But Lorraine had seen an opportunity for what she thought would be provocative television. She'd thought she could push buttons and create a viral moment. And she'd succeeded, just not in the way she'd intended. Because the moment that went viral wasn't Michael Caine losing his temper. It was Michael Caine maintaining his composure and dignity while calling out unacceptable behavior. The conversation that should have been about his new film, about his incredible career, about his experiences working with legendary directors and actors, had instead become about Lorraine's need to be controversial, her need to be talked about. And in pursuing that, she'd revealed herself to be exactly what Michael had called her, a bully. Sarah's contribution had been equally damning. Her smug agreement with every insulting comment, her piling on, her complete lack of empathy or professionalism, and that final good riddance as he left. It was the kind of cruelty that revealed true character, the kind of thing you can't take back or explain away. James, through his silence, had been complicit. He'd sat there and watched a respected colleague be torn apart and said nothing, done nothing, until it was too late. And that cowardice was almost as bad as the active aggression. The whole thing was a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview, in how not to treat a guest, in how not to behave as a professional. And Michael Caine had given a masterclass in how to respond. Not with anger, though he had every right to be angry. Not with insults, though he could have easily destroyed them with words, but with measured, articulate, devastating honesty. He'd called out their behavior for exactly what it was. He'd refused to accept their premise that his age made him less valuable. He'd stood up for himself and for every older person who's ever been told they should step aside. And then he'd left. On his own terms, with his dignity intact. That's what made it so powerful. Lorraine and her panel had tried to diminish him, and instead, they'd diminished themselves. They'd shown the world their pettiness, their cruelty, their lack of respect, and he'd shown the world his strength, his self-respect, his refusal to be treated as less than. The story wasn't about an old actor who couldn't take criticism. It was about a legendary performer who refused to accept disrespect. So there's a difference, a big one. Criticism of someone's work is fair game. That's part of being in the public eye. But personal attacks, ageism, dismissiveness of someone's entire career and contributions, that's something else entirely. And Michael Caine knew the difference. That's why he'd sat there calmly at first, trying to respond reasonably. That's why he'd given them multiple chances to change course. But when it became clear that they had no intention of treating him with basic respect, he'd made the only choice that preserved his self-respect. He'd left. Some people might say he should have stayed, should have risen above it, should have killed them with kindness. But why? Why should he have to sit there and absorb abuse? Why should he have to smile and nod while being told he's selfish and desperate? What would that have accomplished except to enable their behavior? By leaving, he sent a clear message. This is unacceptable. I will not participate in my own humiliation. I value myself too much to sit here and be your punching bag. And that message resonated, because everyone who watched it understood. Everyone who'd ever been in a situation where they were disrespected and wished they'd stood up for themselves saw themselves in Michael Caine at that moment. He became a hero, not by fighting back with equal cruelty, but by simply refusing to accept the premise. By saying, no, I won't play this game. I won't let you make me the villain in your narrative. I won't give you the satisfaction of seeing me broken or angry or diminished. I'll just leave. And in leaving, I'll show everyone watching exactly who you really are. Because that's what happened. In trying to make Michael Caine look bad, Lorraine Kelly had made herself look terrible. In trying to create a memorable television moment, she'd created one, just not the one she'd intended. She'd created a moment that would define her career, but not in a good way. The irony was delicious. She'd accused Michael of damaging his legacy by continuing to work. And in one interview, she'd done more damage to her own legacy than he could do in 100 films. Because people would remember this. They'd remember the day Lorraine Kelly was so desperate for controversy that she attacked a beloved actor and drove him off her show. They'd remember Sarah's smug face as she agreed with every insult. They'd remember James sitting there silently, complicit in his cowardice. They'd remember the audience's gasps, the stunned silence, the moment when it became clear that this had gone too far. And most of all, they'd remember Michael Caine's calm, measured response, his refusal to be drawn into a shouting match, his articulate defense of his right to continue working, his devastating, accurate assessment of what was really happening, and his dignified exit. That's the image that would last. Not a bitter old man lashing out, but a respected professional standing up for himself and for the principle that age doesn't diminish worth. That experience and longevity should be celebrated, not mocked. That everyone deserves basic respect, regardless of their age. Lorraine had fundamentally misunderstood her role. She'd thought she was there to challenge, to provoke, to create drama. But that's not what a good host does. A good host creates a space where their guests can shine, where interesting conversations can happen, where the audience learns something or is entertained in a positive way. Instead, she'd created a hostile environment. She'd ambushed someone who came in good faith. She'd used her position of power as the host to attack someone who was there as her guest. And that betrayal of the basic host-guest relationship was what made it so egregious. When you invite someone onto your show, there's an implicit agreement. They give you their time, their stories, their presence. And in return, you treat them with respect. You might ask difficult questions, but you do it fairly. You might challenge their views, but you do it with civility. You create an environment where real conversation can happen. Lorraine had violated that agreement. She'd invited Michael Caine under false pretenses, made him think he was coming for a friendly chat, and then ambushed him with personal attacks disguised as tough questions. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just cruel. And Michael had seen right through it. That's why his responses were so effective. He didn't attack her skills as a broadcaster. He attacked her character, her choices, her decision to prioritize sensationalism over humanity. And every word hit home because every word was true. When he called her a bully, she'd reacted with outrage. But the outrage was hollow, because everyone watching knew he was right. They'd seen it with their own eyes. They'd watched her pile insult upon insult. They'd watched her dismiss his responses. They'd watched her enjoy making him uncomfortable. That's what bullies do. They find someone they think they can push around, and they push. They test boundaries. They go further and further until someone stops them. And Michael Caine had stopped her. Not by playing her game, but by refusing to play at all. His exit had been perfect. Not storming off in anger. Not throwing insults over his shoulder. Just calmly explaining why he was leaving, removing his microphone, and walking away. It was the exit of someone who knew their worth. Someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. And that's what made Lorraine's final attempts to save face so pathetic. Calling after him, accusing him of being unprofessional, trying to make it seem like he was the problem, but nobody was buying it. Because they'd all seen what had actually happened. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 minutes. But in those 10 minutes, reputations were made and destroyed. Michael Caine's reputation as a class act was reinforced. Lorraine Kelly's reputation took a hit it would never fully recover from. And everyone learned a valuable lesson about the difference between confidence and arrogance, between journalism and bullying, between entertainment and cruelty. It was a moment that transcended the usual talk show drama, because it was real. Michael's frustration was real. His disappointment was real. His decision to leave was real. There was no script, no plan, no safety net. Just real human interaction and real consequences. And in the end, that's what made it so compelling. Not because it was dramatic in a manufactured way, but because it was authentic. It was a real person standing up for themselves in a real situation. making a real choice to prioritize their dignity over appearing agreeable. That's something everyone can relate to. That moment when you realize that being polite isn't worth sacrificing your self-respect. That moment when you decide that walking away is better than staying and being diminished. That moment when you choose yourself. Michael Caine had that moment on live television, and he handled it with the same grace and dignity that had defined his entire career. He showed the world that being a legend isn't just about the work you do. It's about how you carry yourself, how you treat others, how you respond when you're not treated well. He could have responded with cruelty, with insults, with anger, but he didn't. He responded with honesty, with clarity, with a firm boundary, and that's what made him the hero of this story. Not because he won some argument, but because he refused to participate in something that diminished him. Lorraine Kelly had wanted to create memorable television. She'd succeeded. But the memory wasn't of her as a fearless interviewer asking tough questions. It was of her as someone who'd forgotten the basic rules of human decency. Someone who'd let her ego and her desire for ratings override her judgment and her professionalism. And that's the legacy of those 44 seconds. The moment when everything changed. When a simple morning interview became a defining moment for everyone involved. When Michael Caine showed the world what dignity looks like. And when Lorraine Kelly showed the world what happens when you mistake cruelty for courage. The cameras had captured it all. Every word, every expression, every moment of tension. And now it existed forever. A perfect example of how to handle disrespect and how not to conduct an interview. A teaching moment, a cautionary tale, and a reminder that age brings wisdom, and sometimes that wisdom is knowing when to walk away.